everybody to the Brain Music and Learning podcast, and this time we have a very special 2 episodes coming directly from Lapland. Actually, we are not in Lapland now, but we have a special guest, Frank Russo from Toronto Metropolitan University. And you have been to Lapland.
I have. Yeah, it was great to be there. We were there yesterday, and I guess we were there for 4 days. Took in lots of the traditional Lappish things. I ate several reindeer, I think, and made it to the sauna and did the polar dip in the water.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And how was it?
It was fantastic. So I'm from Canada, and there's people that do this every day at the lake, at the foot of, we don't live far from the lake at my house. And I always look at them and kind of judge them, like, why are you doing this? But
maybe you are joining them now.
Maybe. You never know. You never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did some cross-country skiing, and what else did we do? We saw the Northern Lights a little bit over the lake.
That's nice.
And it was a great scientific program on learning and plasticity. So, yeah, very nice time in Lapland.
Yeah, so it's the famous Learning and Plasticity meeting, and each year it has a bit of a different program, and this year you had a session about music.
We did, yes. Yeah. So Professor Chavanyemi and Professor Habibi and I each spoke about our work on how music involvement, engagement can change the brain, how it can, in my case, I focused on how singing can change communication function and feelings of social connection with other people, especially those individuals who are living with communication challenges.
Oh, yeah.
So hearing loss, Parkinson's disease, aphasia, conditions like this. What can singing do to allow those people to rehabilitate their communication skills and feel less isolated? Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Especially hearing loss is something that people talk about nowadays a lot. You
Absolutely.
know, it comes with old age. Someone said that if you live old enough, you will get it for sure.
You got it.
So, yeah. So there, of course, some people ignore it. They don't treat it in any kind of way. They just withdraw from the company of others. Some people work with hearing aids. They try to make their hearing better. And even some people with hearing loss in the old age, they are using cochlear implants. And that's a big challenge, of course, for the auditory system. So all of these groups would probably benefit from singing.
I think they would. So I'll speak about each of those in turn. So, in the case of people with cochlear implants, there's, of course, some challenges to the ability to process pitch relations and to hear spectral aspects of sound. So there is some evidence that music engagement can support the strange input that the auditory system is getting through this electrical stimulation. More recently, I've done a little bit of work in that area, but more recently I've focused on people with age-related hearing loss and those using hearing aids. And I think the important thing that we're seeing there is that brief training in music in the form of group singing can improve speech and noise ability. So the most challenging situation for an older adult with hearing loss is not when things are quiet, when they're having a one-on-one conversation like we're having. It's when they're in a cafeteria, a museum, a bus station. Lots of other speakers are in the area. And so we call that a speech and noise problem. And essentially what's going on there is that the cochlea may still be intact. There may be some stiffening of the cochlea, but more often than not, the age-related hearing loss is starting just beyond the cochlea, where we start to have this synaptic death or synaptopathy. Over time, this will develop into problems with the bottom-up input of sound, and the brain will compensate by filling in the gaps. So the frontal lobes are very busy predicting what's going to come next and supporting that weakened auditory input. This can be effective for a little while, but over time, my own point of view currently is that this can become problematic if you're consistently taxing the top-down system to help you to listen. Then you may actually be doing some damage. Like that's a working hypothesis, if you like.
Okay, that's interesting.
So I'm very interested in what can singing do to slow down that process, to clean up the input. What can hearing aids do to clean up that input? So if we catch you very early on in your hearing loss and we support the input with amplification, if we catch you early on and we cause your auditory system to rely more heavily on this auditory motor connectivity, can we support and maybe even rehabilitate some of that synaptic death from the bottom up? If we can do that, then maybe we can slow down hearing loss, we can improve speech and noise. And we have found some evidence like this. Like, I don't think we've got the full picture, but, we do know from different groups around the world that people that sing seem to have more auditory motor connectivity. The fiber tracts are thicker, more efficient, if you like. In the short term, what we see on an electrophysiological level is that we see that the fidelity of the signal is cleaner. So that suggests that we're on the right track. And on a behavioral level, we're seeing better speech and noise in as little as 10 weeks.
Wow, that's amazing.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think
so it is some kind of paradigm shift in the listening. Because of course, when you are getting the hearing aid, you have to kind of learn to listen again in a new way.
Yeah.
From the
it's very device. Strange sound.
Yeah.
Not as strange as a cochlear implant.
Of course,
but,
yeah.
But it's strange. I don't know if you've tried them on, but
no, I haven't.
Yeah,
but,
it's a booming sound. You feel kind of like a robot. You don't feel like yourself. There's a lot of adaptation that needs to take place.
And then the different hearing aids have different types of algorithms to try to support hearing.
Yes.
And some of those don't really work together with music.
Oh, no, they don't at all. Yeah. So there's, that's a good point. So, for example, the noise suppression algorithms, those are a disaster for music. Fortunately, a lot of the hearing aids now have these automatic programs where they detect the scene and they'll turn off the noise suppression. The other important thing that maybe you're referring to is the wide dynamic range compression. Now, wide dynamic range compression is taking this very fat signal, if you like, lots of changes from the quietest sounds to the loudest sounds, and crushing them all down so that we can then amplify the sound and make the whole world of sound levels available to the listener with hearing loss. So this is perfect. It's an excellent innovation for supporting speech, because speech understanding, especially when it's in quiet, is really driven by the amplitude envelope. And if we can compress everything and amplify it, then we've got a solution. But for things like emotion in the voice or music, we've unfortunately sucked something very important out of the sound. So a lot of the emotional depth in music does come from these dynamics. It does come from the spectrum of the sound. So if I'm excited, maybe my voice is going to go a little higher. There's more energy up there. And these hearing aid algorithms are not really preserving that sound. So what we've found in our research is that although typical hearing aids that have the wide dynamic range compression benefit you in terms of speech understanding, they do nothing for speech emotion perception.
Oh, yeah.
And when we look at music listening, I think it's evolving because the algorithms are getting better. Fortunately, the manufacturers are talking to the researchers and reading the literature.
Yeah.
So when they run the music algorithm, they they soften this wide dynamic range compression. They turn off the noise reduction. If your hearing aid algorithm involves frequency lowering, I could explain that, but it's sort of a technical thing. That's going to destroy music, and that gets shut off when the music program is on. So the current music programs are preserving music fairly well, but you're still losing something. The depth of emotion you're getting is not as strong. And the same is true of the emotional voice.
Yeah. So practically when these people are practicing singing, of course then the hearing aid is on the music mode. So doesn't it then prevent them from learning how it functions in the speech mode? Yeah.
That's a fine point that we haven't really pulled apart. We've only done one study where we have people singing in a group who are using hearing aids. And like most of our work is with people with age-related hearing loss not wearing their hearing aids. For the people who were wearing hearing aids, we actually encouraged them to sing without their hearing aids.
Okay.
And a lot of audiologists suggest the same thing. I know that there are practicing musicians who really rely on their hearing aids, especially if they're playing in an orchestra, so that they could get the cues and when to come in. But many other musicians prefer not to. I prefer the non-distorted sound.
Yeah, I understand that fully.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then there's a lot of people who totally refuse using hearing aids, even though they have a hearing loss.
Right.
And they say they don't learn to use them. They sound weird, and
or they start to use them and then they keep them in the closet.
Yeah, exactly. So they got them, but they are not using them.
Yes.
And then it easily happens that you stay home. You don't continue your social life, and that's a threat to cognition.
Absolutely, and there's a really interesting link between hearing loss and cognitive decline that we're all trying to understand as a community. But one of the paths there's at least three paths for understanding this connection. One is that there's some common link, or if you like, a canary in the coal mine kind of hypothesis. The idea, in the old days when they were mining for coal, they'd have a small bird there, and if the bird died, the miners knew to leave. So similarly, maybe we start to see early decline in the auditory system and later hippocampal degeneration and frontal degeneration. So that's one path. Another path is one that's mediated through socialization. Mm-hmm. And, it's very clear that there's this link between hearing loss and depression and social isolation. So people, even with close friends and family, choose not to accept invitations because they know it's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
They don't want to be embarrassed. It's kind of rational in the short term, but in the long term, we know that if you turn off the socialization tap, that there are going to be cognitive consequences. So that's another path. The third path that I'm interested in, and not that I'm voting for any any winner here. I think they're all probably involved somehow. But the third path is this idea of neural inefficiency creating oxidation in the brain and, kind of wearing out the engine, if you like. Or it's like an analogy I use is you're riding an old bike and you're pedaling as hard as you can to get this thing moving, but the gears are not working and the chain is slipping, and over time you're actually damaging the bike and everything. So I think that this is a very real possibility of, one of the reasons we have a link between hearing loss and cognitive decline is this overuse, so this listening effort, it's sometimes called. So what we have found in some of our recent work, using optical imaging, using FNIRS we have found the reason we use FNIRS to begin with is it plays well with hearing aids.
Oh, yeah.
But what we have found is that hearing aids alleviate the listening effort, and certain forms of hearing aid processing, specifically using deep neural networks, might alleviate the amount of frontal upregulation more than a traditional hearing aid. So the hearing aid lessens the load. The deep neural net lessens it even more. So over time, this may cause less neurodegeneration. It's certainly possible.
It sounds very promising.
I'm excited about it. So we're about to do a study. I think I lost my track here, and I want to go back to where we were, but we're about to start a study where we will track people with early age-related hearing loss, and we will give them state-of-the-art hearing aids. And what we're interested in is whether that early frontal upregulation, which is compensatory, continues to be compensatory while people use the hearing aid. So one group will use the hearing aid, and again, we're going to clean up that bottom-up input. We're going to reduce the frontal upregulation, and when you do upregulate, it should be compensatory. What I mean is the more activation in areas like the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the more correct responses you're going to get in a speech and noise paradigm. It's going to be compensatory. And in the group that doesn't get the hearing aids, we expect to see what we've seen in other populations, that it's not actually compensatory. It's the case that the more you drive these frontal systems, the worse you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
So if we can stop this through early hearing aid intervention and through programs that clean up the signal, like singing, then this is extremely important, especially if there are consequences that have to do with cognitive health.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and this is not a minority that we are talking about. It's a huge group of people. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
I'm already there a little bit myself. I'm not ready to be a candidate for this study I was just describing. I'm not quite there. I almost wish I was.
Yeah, and of course this is much more typical in musicians, but also for people who have been working in noisy conditions, like early childhood educators or something like that. So it is really very
restaurant
very common.
service
yes,
workers.
Exactly. So why singing? Why not, for example, reading poems aloud or something like that? What is special in singing?
Great question. There's some theoretical ideas. I don't think we fully understand this, but I believe that reading poetry and listening to poetry could be incredibly effective. For me, the important thing about these interventions involving singing is that we have multiple ways of hearing and understanding. In the speech processing network, we talk about a dorsal root and a ventral root. So the dorsal root is a two-way street. It's taking the auditory input, it's feeding it into the motor planning areas, and then we're making predictions about the incoming auditory input. This dorsal root is very important in music. It's very important in language learning. It's very important early on when children are tuning into the sounds of their environment. But over time, as we become expert in a language, we tend to rely more on this ventral root, which is more mapping sound onto meaning. So I come to learn as an English speaker that dad means this guy who's helping me, and mom means this person that's helping me. So it's very important. It's not like one root is better than the other, but if you have weakened auditory input, then this mapping sound onto meaning is not effective, and we need to do a lot of repair to the signal. We have to rely on working memory, fill in the gaps of things we missed. But what I think can happen in singing is we come to rely more on the dorsal root, and we strengthen the ability to make predictions about the incoming sound based on what we're listening to. So because of this auditory motor connection, I think over time that can clean up the auditory input and make it easier for us to understand. So what we're trying to do is shift the reliance from top-down processing and sound to meaning mapping, and to shift it more to mapping sound onto an action plan. Mm-hmm. So singing does that really well, because when we sing, we're continuously monitoring our voice. Mm-hmm. When I speak, it's like playing a note on a piano. But when I sing, I'm continuously monitoring my voice. If I'm singing with other people, then I'm monitoring how my voice deviates from the group, because we're always fluctuating a little bit. And so this is very nice training. It's continuous. I also think that the rhythmic aspect of music is probably facilitative somehow. I don't completely have a working model of this, but I think that it may be easier to use this dorsal root when there's an underlying beat to frame our predictions around.
So it's kind of easier to predict because you know when the next beat is coming.
Exactly. And there's a scaffold. There's a plan.
There's not so many possibilities for the durations of sounds, for example. So it's going to be one of those possible ones. But in speech, it can be almost anything. So I think those aspects are important. The reliance on the dorsal root, the motor entrainment that happens when we're engaged in music. And I think the group aspect is critical. So listening to others as we're producing. All of this, I think, is fabulous training for cleaning up the auditory input. And then there's also all of these social benefits. So earlier, you mentioned the social isolation. What we have this consortium, this network called SingWell, researchers around the world doing this kind of work. And what we're trying to track here is not just the communication gains, but also what are the social and emotional gains. And what we're doing in SingWell, like lots of people are singing and tracking the benefits of singing, but our explicit intention is to make the singing inclusive. So we don't care what you sound like. We don't care if you don't have to have any musical experience. We just want you to come and be with your peers, other people with hearing loss in this case. So the groups are somewhat homogenous, like it's Parkinson's patients, people with hearing loss, people with aphasia. So rather than coming together as people with hearing loss and talking about our problems, having this deficit focus, we have this asset focus that we're going to get together and build up our voices together and build up our hearing together. And as long as everyone understands that some voices are going to be stronger than others and all voices are welcome, then everyone ends up feeling quite included and connected. So we have documented that regularly in these inclusive environments, we see a drop in cortisol. We have limited evidence, but we have some published evidence that in inclusive group singing conditions, we get this increase in oxytocin. So oxytocin has been linked to social bonding. When people sing on their own, we're not seeing that increase in oxytocin. So if I am feeling isolated and alone, and suddenly I do this group event and my stress reduces and I feel more connected to my peers and I feel more capable, more competent, more connected to the world, then this is an incredibly important kind of therapy.
And that's what I'm trying to build up through SingWell. I really believe in this vision that if we do this inclusive singing, not only is it therapeutic from an audiological point of view, it's therapeutic from a human social point of view. It's so easy to scale. Communities around the world, there's so many people that are talented in doing choir singing. It's just changing the focus that it's going to be inclusive, and we're going to group together people that are all sharing the same communication challenge, and we're going to build ourselves up.
Wow, this is really, really amazing. Thank you so much for visiting our podcast, Professor Frank Russo.
My pleasure. Thank you, Minna.
Thank you. Oh, what a wonderful ending we have here.